They said it was the easiest gig in town, midnight security at a storage facility with cameras on every wall. But no one mentioned the unit that was always rented, always locked, and never once accessed in the 5 years I worked there. It was the kind of job you fall into when everything else in your life has bottomed out. Night security at Redline Storage, a backlit warehouse buried behind an old strip mall just outside town. Cameras everywhere. Motion sensors on every hallway. And the silence? Absolute. Most nights felt like being buried alive in concrete and cold fluorescence. I started in 2018. Freshly laid off, 2 months behind on rent, and desperate for a paycheck. The job seemed perfect. Low stress, steady hours, and no customers. Just me, the monitors, and the occasional raccoon triggering a motion alert. The manager, Carl, was a lazy slob who only showed up twice a week to collect cash and change out hard drives. But he had one rule. One thing he drilled into me harder than anything else. Don't mess with Unit 233. I laughed the first time he said it, assuming it was some inside joke. But he didn't laugh back. Ever, he added, eyes locked on mine. You don't open it. You don't knock on it. You don't even talk about it. It's always rented. Always paid up. You treat it like it doesn't exist. It sounded absurd. But sure enough, there it was on the system, Unit 233. Last accessed, never? No entries, no alerts, no one ever seen near it. Just a quiet gray square on the screen, sitting in the far corner of the C-wing, right where the camera coverage lagged by 3 seconds. I figured maybe Carl used it himself, storing something shady. Maybe drugs? Or cash? Or worse. I didn't care. I wasn't getting paid to ask questions. But 5 years is a long time to ignore something that stares you in the face every night. That night, my last shift, I'd been filling in for the new guy, Jeremy. He'd called out with some excuse about food poisoning, but honestly, I think he just didn't want to be there anymore. None of the new hires lasted more than a few weeks. It was just after 1 a.m. when the alarm triggered in C-wing. Motion detected. Camera flicked on. A figure stood just outside Unit 233. No light. No movement. Just the shape of someone, staring at the door. Still as a statue. The timestamp blinked. 1 second. 2. 3. Then static. The feed cut out. I cycled to the next camera, same wing, opposite side, and caught a glimpse of the figure turning. Heading down the hallway. Away from 233. I grabbed my flashlight and the master keys. Against every instinct, I told myself I had to check it out. That's what they were paying me for, right? I radioed Carl, but of course he didn't answer. I could hear the phone ringing on his desk from my chair. So I went alone. C-wing was colder than the rest of the building. Always had been. The lights buzzed overhead, flickering like they couldn't make up their minds. I walked slowly, each step echoing off the concrete. My flashlight jittered slightly in my grip. I told myself it was just nerves. Unit 233 loomed at the far end. Untouched. Locked. The heavy padlock was still in place. I scanned the hallway. Empty. I turned back to the unit, and that's when I noticed it. The lock wasn't latched. It looked locked. But it wasn't. Someone had set it there, carefully, quietly, just to make it look like the door hadn't been opened. I leaned in and whispered to myself, "What the hell is going on here?" And then I heard something shift inside the unit. Not a voice. Not a shout. Just something moving. My breath caught in my throat. That sound, it was soft, but deliberate. Like someone inside the unit had just shifted their weight. A scrape, maybe? The kind you hear when someone's trying not to make noise but fails just enough to be heard. I should have walked away. I should have backed out, locked the building behind me, and called it in like protocol said. But something about that lock, how carefully it had been staged to look untouched, ate at me. I had to know. For 5 years I'd stared at this screen, wondering what could be inside. Why it was so untouchable. Why everyone avoided it like a live wire. I reached out and slowly pulled the lock off the latch. The metal was freezing cold. I hesitated with my hand on the handle and whispered, "If I die doing this, it better make the papers." I pulled the door open. The metal groaned as it rolled upward, like it hadn't been touched in years. My flashlight sliced through the dark and caught a narrow passage. Not boxes. Not furniture. A passage. Someone had built walls. Crude wooden partitions, creating a kind of tunnel that led deeper into the unit. The air hit me next, stale and warm, thick like a body had been sweating in it for hours. I stepped inside. The concrete floor felt damp beneath my boots. Something shifted ahead. I froze. Then I heard it. Breathing. Not heavy. Not panicked. Just steady, measured. I took one step forward, and something moved fast. A blur at the end of the passage. My flashlight caught a shoulder, a bare arm, a smear of dirt. Then it was gone, ducked into another makeshift corridor. "Hey!" I shouted. "This is private property. You're trespassing." No response. Just that breathing again. Closer now. I should have called for backup. But Carl wasn't answering. And the cops wouldn't bother for a noise complaint at a damn storage facility. I followed the corridor, turning slowly, keeping the beam of my light locked forward. That's when I saw the walls. Newspapers. Hundreds of them. Taped and tacked up like wallpaper. Articles about missing persons. Most of them local. Faces of women, teenagers, even a few kids. Stories dating back a decade. All yellowed, all stained. One was circled in red ink, over and over, until the paper was almost torn through. My stomach twisted. Then I saw it. The corner of the room, tucked behind a sheet of plastic, like someone had tried to make it cozy. A mattress. A pillow. Stained. Piles of empty food cans. And next to them, a camera. Mounted on a tripod. Facing the far wall. I turned to follow its gaze. There, nailed to the wood, were dozens of Polaroids. Every one of them was a face. Terrified. Drugged. Some bloody. Some bound. All frozen in time. My hands were shaking now. I started backing up, one step at a time, flashlight jittering with every heartbeat. That's when the voice came from behind me. "You weren't supposed to find this." I spun around, and there he was. Carl. His greasy hair was plastered to his forehead, and his eyes? They were glassy, manic. He wasn't holding a weapon. But he didn't need to. I could see it in his stance, the readiness. Like he'd done this before. Like he'd waited for this. I turned and bolted. He didn't chase me. Didn't have to. I sprinted through the maze, barely dodging walls and crates, crashing into the door, slamming it shut behind me. I shoved the lock back through the latch, hands fumbling, sweat pouring. Then I ran. Called 911 from the parking lot. The cops came fast. Too fast, honestly. Like they'd been waiting for something to finally break loose. I gave my statement, shaking and wild, pointing them straight to Unit 233. But when they opened it? Empty. No mattress. No tripod. No pictures. Just concrete floors and dust. Like it had never happened. Carl was gone, too. Quit the next morning. Disconnected his number. Vanished. Red lines under new management now. But I'll never forget that last shift. And if you ever find yourself working security at a place like this, check every lock. Because sometimes they're not locked at all. Every night, I walked the same patrol through the empty west wing of the hospital. No patients, no staff, just silence. But when I started finding signs of movement, open doors, footprints, I realized I might not be walking it alone. I started working hospital security back in 2020, right when the world shut down. I wasn't a cop, wasn't military, just a guy with a flashlight and a badge clipped to his belt. The shifts were long, mostly boring, and always overnight. Graveyard. Midnight to 8. I worked at Merrow Hill Medical Center, about 40 minutes from where I lived. The place was old, half modernized, half falling apart. It sprawled like a drunk signature, buildings tacked onto buildings over decades of expansions no one ever finished. There were wings so dead they didn't even bother heating them anymore. The West Wing was one of those. No active patients. No functioning lights in most of the halls. A dozen rooms with stripped beds and equipment locked behind rusting doors. Technically, it was still part of the patrol route, so I walked it twice a night, once around 1 a.m., once near dawn. Always alone. Always with a radio that never crackled unless someone hit the vending machine too hard. At first, I liked it. The solitude. The quiet. You don't get that kind of stillness anywhere else. But then, things started to change. It began subtle. A room that had been closed was cracked open. Just an inch. The kind of thing you don't notice unless you've walked the same path every night for 3 months. Room 307, I remember. The one with the broken bed frame and no ceiling tiles. I shut it and moved on. Next night? Open again. I asked my partner, an older guy named Darnell, if he ever noticed it. He just shrugged. That wing's drafty as hell. Doors swing all the time. Maybe he was right. But it didn't feel like that. Then, one night, I found a coffee cup. Just sitting there. Middle of the hallway. No lid, still warm. I bent down to check it, definitely fresh. The cup had the Hospital Café's logo, and the timestamp on the sticker was from less than 20 minutes earlier. I radioed Darnell. Anyone from janitorial in the West Wing tonight? Nah, he said. They skip it. No one's assigned over there. I didn't like that. But what could I do? I logged it and kept walking. But that night, my 1 a.m. sweep, I swear I heard something. Footsteps. 2 halls over. At first, I thought it was echo. Old buildings do that. But these weren't random. They had a rhythm. A pace. Not rushed, not limping. Just walking. Like someone else was patrolling. I cut my light and leaned into the hallway. Silence. Then a flicker. One of the motion lights down the corridor blinked on, then off. Like something, or someone, had passed beneath it. I called out. Security! Anyone there? Nothing. I stood there for a long time, waiting, listening. But there was nothing else. When I did the dawn sweep, the footprints were there. Clear in the dust near room 314. Work boots. Deep tread. Not mine, my soles were smooth from years of use. I checked the security feeds. Of course, that section of the building didn't have functioning cameras. Budget cuts. Corroded wiring. Half the place might as well be a ghost town. But it wasn't ghosts I was worried about. It was people. Someone was in the wing. And I had a strong feeling they didn't want to be found out I didn't report the footprints. Not officially. If I wrote it up, Carl, our supervisor, would just tell me I was tired, seeing things, or worse, accuse me of sleeping on the job. So I kept my mouth shut and watched the West Wing closer. Each night, something changed. One night, the elevator light for that wing, long since disabled, was on. Just glowing red, like it was waiting to go somewhere. Another night, I found a chair turned sideways in the middle of the corridor, pointed directly at the hallway camera. Like someone had been watching it, or watching me. It stopped being creepy. It started being personal. Then came the drawings. Crude, black ink sketches on printer paper. Taped to the inside glass of room 312, the one with the boarded window. They showed a figure, just a rough outline of a man, standing in a hallway. In the next drawing, he was closer. In the third, he was staring at the viewer, head tilted, with something dripping from his hand. I found those just after 1 a.m. I remember because I froze for a full minute staring at them, telling myself they hadn't been there 20 minutes earlier. I checked my body cam. Sure enough, during my previous sweep, the window was empty. I wanted to tell Darnell. But I couldn't prove anything. And honestly, I think I was afraid he'd laugh. Or worse, he'd believe me. That next night, I brought a second flashlight. The big mag one, heavy enough to use as a club. I did my 1 a.m. sweep slow and methodical. I checked every doorknob, every corner. Every creak of sound made my heart jackhammer. And that's when I saw him. Not on the monitor. Not on a reflection. In person. I rounded the corner past 309, and he was just there, at the far end of the hallway. Standing. Facing me. Work boots. Hospital scrubs. But his badge was missing. His head was shaved clean. And his arms hung limp like he'd been standing there a long time. I froze. "Hey!" I called, voice cracking. He didn't move. I took a step forward, flashlight raised. "This is a restricted area. You're not supposed to be here." He stepped sideways, right through the open doorway of 310, and vanished. I sprinted after him. The room was empty. No windows, no closets, no vents wide enough for a man. Just peeling linoleum and the stink of mildew. I backed out, breath shaking. The next morning, I showed Darnell the bodycam footage. But when we played it back? Nothing. The hallway was empty. My voice was still on the tape, shouting at a ghost. Darnell gave me a long look and said, "You want a few nights off?" I shook my head. "I want to find out who's screwing with me." That was a mistake. My last night at Marrow Hill was 6 days later. 1:03 a.m. A crash from room 314. Loud. Glass or metal? Maybe both. I ran down the hallway, maglite gripped like a weapon. The door was open. I stepped in, and found what looked like a nest. A pile of blankets, wrappers, half-eaten food. In the corner, a cracked laptop still powered on. On the screen was a paused video feed. Me. Standing in the hallway. From behind. A second angle played next to it. Also me. Inside the room. That's when I understood. I wasn't alone in the West Wing. I was being watched. Followed. I ran. Radioed for backup. Didn't stop moving until I was in the security office, door locked, lights off. Darnell arrived 20 minutes later. When we went back together, everything was gone. Laptop. Nest. Footprints. Like it had all been wiped clean. I quit the next morning. And some nights, when I can't sleep, I wonder, who was he? And is he still down there, waiting for the next guard to come looking? The mall had been closed for over a year when they brought me in to monitor it overnight. No customers. No open stores. Just endless silence, until I found fresh handprints on the inside of a display case that hadn't been touched in months. They said it was temporary. Just a 3-week contract, watching Ridgeway Mall during overnight hours while the new security system got installed. My job? Show up at 10 p.m., walk the perimeter every hour, make sure no squatters or vandals had snuck in through the loading docks. Easy work. No customers, no management, no bullshit. The place had been dead since early 2022. Some kind of zoning dispute. The anchor stores shut down first, then the food court, and finally the whole damn thing closed its doors for good. Now it sat like a fossil in the middle of the city, silent, dark, and forgotten. I was the only one there at night. The power still worked, but they kept it dim, just emergency lights along the main walkways, plus a flashlight and a key ring for me. The cameras were patchy at best. Half of them were already offline by the time I got there. I didn't mind. Honestly, I liked the solitude. Until night 4. That's when things started to feel off. It was just after midnight, and I'd made my usual round, front entrance to the back hallways, up to the shuttered second floor and down past the old food court. I was halfway through my report when I passed the big glass display in front of the old children's shoe store. That case had been empty for months. Maybe longer. The dust alone was thick enough to write your name in. But tonight? There were handprints. On the inside of the glass. Small ones. Kid-sized. 5 of them. Pressed against the glass like someone had been trying to push their way out. I stood there for a long time just staring at them, flashlight shaking in my hand. They were too high to be a raccoon, too symmetrical for a prank, and too clean. The inside of that case hadn't been opened in months. I checked the perimeter again, every door, every gate, every loading dock. Locked. No signs of entry. No broken panels. No triggered alarms. Still, I made a note. Filed it under anomaly. Sent a photo to my temp supervisor, who replied, "Weird. Clean it off. Probably an old print that surfaced when the humidity dropped." Bullshit. But whatever. I wiped them down and moved on. Next night, I brought my own camera. Not my phone. A real one, with night vision and motion alerts. I set it up across from the display case, just in case it happened again. For the rest of the shift, everything was calm. I walked the loops. I read. I drank coffee that tasted like burnt regret. When I checked the camera at 4 a.m., I froze. At exactly 2:42 a.m., something triggered the motion sensor. The screen lit up in black and green, and there it was. A figure. Small. Childlike. Standing on the other side of the glass. Not moving. Not blinking. Just standing there. The footage cut off after 10 seconds. No return trigger. No exit. Just gone. I sprinted to the display case. Nothing. No prints. No dust. No sign anyone had touched it. I checked the other stores. The utility halls. The janitor's closet. Even the freight elevator no one used anymore. All empty. But that image, the silhouette of a child just standing there, it burned into me. And when I reviewed the footage again, I realized something worse. The timestamp was wrong. Because at 2:42 a.m., I was standing in the hallway. Just 10 feet away. I stared at that footage for a long time. The grainy black and white image of a small figure pressed against the display case. Just standing there. No blur. No movement. And in the background, barely visible, you could see a sliver of me. 10 feet away. Looking the other direction. I never heard anything. I never felt anything. But whatever, or whoever, it was had been standing right behind me. The next day, I bought a second camera. This one had audio and better night vision. I mounted it directly above the children's store display case, then left the other one across the corridor. Redundancy. Just in case. That night was different. Something was waiting. Around 1 a.m., I started to feel watched. It wasn't paranoia. I've been in law enforcement adjacent work long enough to know the difference. My skin felt tight. Every sound bounced too loud off the empty tile. I kept glancing at the shadows behind me. My radio? Dead quiet. I was halfway through the upper-level food court when I saw it. Movement. Down near the old pretzel stand, something darted across the corridor. Not a person. Too low. Too fast. I ran after it. When I turned the corner, there was no one there. Just silence. But one of the steel chairs near the pretzel counter was tipped over. It had been upright on my last pass 20 minutes earlier. I checked the doors again. Still locked. Alarm lights still green. Whatever was inside, it hadn't come in tonight. It had been here. Waiting. I made my way back to the corridor by the shoe store. The hallway felt colder. The lights buzzed softer. Like they were dimming on purpose. The cameras were still in place, green LEDs blinking. I checked the live feed on my phone. Nothing. I sat down on the bench across from the case and waited. Every creak made my spine lock up. Every flicker of movement caught in the corner of my eye made me tighten my grip on the flashlight. 2:43 a.m. The corridor behind me lit up. Motion light. I turned around. Empty. I stood slowly. Took 2 steps toward the edge of the hallway and... Tap. Glass. Behind me. I spun. The display case had a fresh print. Just one this time. A palm. Centered. Clean. Impossible. I hadn't heard a sound. Hadn't blinked. There was no one there. I leaned in, inches from the glass. The print was wet, fresh, and small, like it came from a child. I backed away and pulled the camera feed again. There was no footage, no trigger, no motion log. Just a black gap from 2:41 to 2:45. Like the feed had been cut out. When my shift ended at 6, I didn't even wait to file my report. I left both cameras in place and drove home, hands shaking, windows down, trying to breathe. That was my last night at Ridgeway. The company offered me hazard pay to stay the final week. I refused. Let someone else babysit the dark. But a month later, I heard something from a buddy on the news shift. One of the display cases had been shattered. Not broken from the outside. From the inside. They said there was nothing missing. Just a single chair, dragged halfway across the corridor. And 2 wet, bare footprints, side by side, leading away from the scene. No cameras caught it. No one saw who did it. And the scariest part? They never found a way in. When I started working nights at the shipping warehouse, they told me never to question the closed crates in Section 19. But when I caught someone unlocking one with a code that wasn't on the books, I started watching back. The warehouse was a skeleton at night, silent, humming, and too big for one man to patrol without going a little numb. I was hired as an overnight security guard in early February, just after the holidays. The place was still half full of unsorted returns, shipping containers stacked 20 feet high like a cargo graveyard. My post was simple. 1 round every hour. Walk the perimeter. Log any movement or lights left on. Don't touch anything. Don't snoop. It was a corporate distribution center for a national retailer, big enough to need 20 staff during the day, but small enough that at night, they thought a single guard would suffice. They were wrong. My first week was uneventful. Cold nights. Endless corridors. I listened to podcasts to stay awake, counting the steps it took to reach each checkpoint. It was a routine. And routine, I've learned, makes people careless. It started with a sound. I was cutting through the south aisle, near Section 19, the deepest corner of the building, where the overflow crates sat untouched for months at a time. Technically off limits after hours. Most were sealed tight with steel straps and digital locks, each one coded to a centralized tracking system. We weren't allowed near them without a supervisor present. But someone was there. I heard the soft beep-beep of a keypad. Then the click of an electronic lock disengaging. I killed my flashlight and crouched low, moving between the racks. My boots were too loud, so I stopped moving completely and just watched. A figure, male, tall, black hoodie, was crouched beside a crate marked Expired 19A. The label had no tracking number. Just a smudge of faded red ink. I watched him punch in a 6-digit code. Beep, beep, click. The crate door slid open. He reached in, but I couldn't see what he pulled out. He stuffed something into a duffel bag, closed the crate, and walked off like he'd done it 100 times before. I followed. From a distance. Just close enough to get a direction. He didn't go to the exit. He cut through the break room door, unlocked. I waited 5 minutes before going in after him. The break room was dark. Coffee machine humming. A chair slightly pushed out. Nothing else. No man. No duffel. No sign anyone had been there. I checked the logs at the desk terminal. No employees scheduled after 6 p.m. All entries logged from my own batch. The next morning, I asked the warehouse manager, Amy, about the crates in Section 19. She stiffened. Said they were expired assets. What does that mean? She shrugged. Items waiting for final disposal. Then why are they locked with codes? Security. Old policy. Nothing valuable in them. I didn't believe her. Not after what I saw. So I checked the camera feed. And that's when things got worse. From midnight to 12:47 a.m., the exact time I'd seen the guy, the footage looped. Same 3 minutes, over and over. But only in Section 19. I saved the loop and backed up the footage to a USB. Just in case. That night, I patrolled like normal. But this time, I brought my own camera. Tucked into my vest pocket, facing forward. I made sure to walk past the same crate. It was locked. But the keypad? Smudged. Someone had used it again. I spent my shift watching shadows. The crate in section 19 sat quiet as ever, padlocked and sealed. But I knew better now. Someone had been in there. Maybe multiple times. And whoever it was, they knew the camera blind spots. Hell, they might have created them. By 2 a.m. I was jumpy. Every creak sounded closer. Every flicker of motion lights pulled my eyes to corners I'd passed a dozen times already. Then movement. Far end of the aisle. A figure. Not walking. Standing. Same hoodie. Same build. He didn't move when I turned the corner. Just stood there, staring down the corridor like he belonged. I spoke up. Hey! You're not supposed to be here. Nothing. I took 2 steps forward and raised my flashlight. He turned and ran. Not toward an exit. Deeper into the racks. I gave chase. My boots pounded concrete, breath rising in the cold air, flashlight beam bouncing through the maze of cargo towers. I shouted again. Security! Stop where you are! But he didn't. He dipped around a corner, and by the time I caught up, he was gone. The hallway ended in a dead wall. Just storage containers, locked and dust-covered. I stood there, heart racing. Then I saw it. The wall wasn't a wall. A row of crates had been stacked to look like a solid barrier. But one was pulled out just slightly, leaving a narrow space behind it. Barely wide enough for a person. I slipped through. And found the secret aisle. It ran behind the racks. Hidden. Shadowed. Cold as hell. And halfway down, another open crate. Empty. No label. No barcode. Inside? Nothing but dust and a crushed Red Bull can. At the far end of the aisle, a door. One I'd never seen. No exit signs. No clearance panel. Just a metal push-bar door, painted the same gray as the walls. I pushed it open. Inside, a small windowless office. No badge access. No lights. But there was a table. A single duffel bag sat on top of it, half-zipped. I opened it. Phones. Dozens of them. Burners, all taped together with names scrawled on masking tape, some full names, others initials. Below that, old credit cards. IDs. A handgun. And a small hard drive. I backed away and called my supervisor. No answer. I called the police. I didn't tell them everything, just that I was a security guard and I'd found an unregistered room with suspicious contents in a closed section of the warehouse. They said they'd send someone within the hour. I locked the office from the outside with a chain I'd grabbed off a rack. Then I sat in the break room, back to the wall, staring at the door until the cruiser pulled in. When the officers arrived, I brought them straight to the aisle, but the crates had been moved. The gap? Gone. Crates pushed flush like they'd never been touched. I insisted. Showed them the footage from my vest cam. They reviewed it. Nodded. Then told me they'd take it from there. That was the last time I was inside that building. 2 days later, I was told my services were no longer required. I never heard from the officers again. Never got a follow-up. And when I drove by the warehouse a week later, a different company was posted on the security trailer. New logo. New guards. Section 19? Gone. Leveled. Like it had never existed. And that duffel bag? I've never stopped thinking about it. Because there was one phone in there, sitting on top of the others. Still on. Battery low. And when I picked it up, it was recording. I was assigned to guard an abandoned grain facility overnight. One road in, one out, miles from the nearest town. They said no one had set foot inside for years. But on my first shift, I found a woman's scarf. Still warm. You ever take a job that feels wrong the second you show up? That's how it was with the grain tower. It stood like a monument to collapse, 30 miles off Highway 22. Abandoned in '09, supposedly. But now the company that owned it, AgriPlus, was paying for night security after recent incidents. No details. Just a vague line about trespassers and asset protection. I figured it'd be easy money. For 12-hour shifts, midnight to noon, for 3 weeks. Hazard pay, too, since the tower hadn't been structurally inspected in years. They gave me a vest, a handheld radio, and an emergency sat phone. No cell reception out there. No backup either. Just me, the grain tower, and the rats. The facility was a few rusted-out silos, a corrugated metal processing center, and a control shack. One access road. One fence with a gate you had to chain behind you when you entered. My first night? Dead quiet. Second night? Not so much. Around 3 a.m., I was walking the northern edge, where the cracked pavement ends and weeds take over. That's when I saw it, something fluttering near the silo ladder. At first, I thought it was a trash bag or a bird caught in wire. But no. It was a scarf. Silky. Red. Caught on a low rung. When I picked it up, it was still warm. I looked around, heart thudding. "Hello?" I called. No answer. Just the sound of distant metal creaking and wind cutting through the husks of the silos. The scarf had initials stitched in the corner, RM. No other signs of anyone. No footprints in the gravel. No vehicle on the road. Nothing on the fence cam. I radioed the dispatch office. Told them what I'd found. The voice on the other end didn't ask questions. Just said, "Log it and keep patrolling." That's when I started to feel it. Not fear. Not yet. Something worse. Observation. Like the tower itself was waiting for me to make the wrong move. The next shift, I brought my own notebook. Started taking real notes. 2:12 a.m., heard footsteps on the silo walkway. Steel on steel. Checked, no one there. 3:46 a.m., grain chute light turned on for 7 seconds, then shut off. 5:19 a.m., found footprints in the control shack. Bare feet. Size, maybe 6. Slight drag on the left. I showed my supervisor the notes the next day. He gave me a weird smile and said, "That place messes with your head. Just finish your shifts and cash the checks." I didn't like that smile. It wasn't tired. It was knowing. So night 4, I broke protocol. I climbed the silo. The ladder ran up 80 feet of wind-blasted steel. At the top, a catwalk wrapped around the opening hatch, padlocked from the inside. Not a soul in sight. Until I turned around. A figure. Down below. Standing in the weeds. Motionless. They were staring straight up at me. I called out. No answer. I blinked, and they were gone. I nearly fell on the way down. When I got back to the ground, I ran to the spot they'd been standing. Just flattened grass. And one more thing. A shoe. Small. Women's. And buried inside it, tucked beneath the insole, was a photograph. Water damaged. Blurry. But I recognized the scarf instantly. It was wrapped around the neck of a smiling woman. And standing behind her? Someone with their face blacked out in marker. I didn't sleep that day. I kept replaying the climb, the figure below me, and the photo, especially the blacked out face. Who brings a photo to an abandoned silo and marks it out like that? Rage? Shame? Or a message? I was supposed to clock in again that night at midnight. But by 10 p.m., I was already parked at the facility gate, headlights off, watching the road. Nothing. Just bugs smacking the windshield and the low, unsettling groan of distant machinery shifting in the dark. I unlocked the gate and pulled in. This time, I brought more than a notebook. I had a camcorder, a crowbar, and the scarf in a ziplock. It still smelled faintly of lilac and sweat. At 2:04 a.m. I saw the lights. The processing center, where the controls for the old grain funnels used to be, suddenly flicked on. Just the overheads. Bright, sterile, buzzing like a swarm. No one was scheduled. No one had keys. Not even me. I sprinted across the cracked concrete yard, crowbar in one hand, flashlight in the other. The doors were wide open. The air inside smelled sharp, metal, mildew, and something sour underneath it all. I stepped in. The lights were flickering now, like someone was playing with the breaker. Then I heard it. A voice. Quiet. Soft. Female. Singing. I moved toward the sound. Around the old sorting conveyors. Past the rusted hopper. Toward the stairwell that led to the observation deck. And there, on the bottom stair, was the scarf. Folded perfectly. No sign of anyone. No footsteps. No movement. Just the scarf and the voice echoing down the metal chute from above. I climbed. Every creak of the stairs made my nerves pull tighter. When I reached the top, I raised the flashlight before stepping through the hatch. The room was empty. Dust-covered monitors. Broken chairs. Coffee mug fossilized to the desk. But the singing was louder now. I turned. The control panel, a mess of switches and dials, was lit. One green light blinking steadily. A frequency code. CH9. I hadn't touched the radio all night. It was clipped to my vest, silent. I reached for it. The moment I flipped to channel 9, the voice cut off. Static. Then breathing. Then, "You saw her, didn't you?" The voice wasn't mine. Wasn't from any dispatcher I knew. It was a man. Calm. Dry. I didn't answer. "You saw her scarf. That means she liked you. Who is this?" I asked. A pause. Then, "You shouldn't have come back." The radio cut. Dead silence. I grabbed the camcorder and filmed the panel, the room, the blinking light. Every instinct told me to leave, but another part of me needed proof. So I went to the silo. The same one where I'd found the scarf. At the base, something was waiting. A note. Folded, weighed down by a bolt. 4 words, handwritten. "Ask about missing report." That was it. I left. Next morning, I called a contact in county records. Asked if there had ever been any missing persons linked to the tower. He said it was classified. I told him I'd found evidence, a photo, personal effects. Long pause. Then, "You need to stop asking." 2 days later, AgriPlus terminated my contract. Said they were shutting down all security efforts at that location. The tower was torn down 6 weeks later. Quietly. No permits. No media. But here's what I know. Her name was Rachel Moore. She went missing in 2013. Her car was found 2 miles from the tower. No body. No suspects. Case frozen. And now wiped clean. But she was there. I felt her there. And someone else was too. Still is.